Welcome to another episode of Make Mental Health Matter with the theme on Mondays as Mental Health Mondays, where I talk to guests who are either professionals in the mental health space, advocates of mental health, or those that live with or experience a mental health challenge. And as a reminder, if this is your first time watching, please make sure that you follow, you like, subscribe, hit down that button that says subscribe down below if you happen to be watching this on YouTube. If you're watching this on E360 or any of the TV channels, you can follow us or add us to your favorites list so that you don't miss another episode. And as a reminder, yes, because I usually always have guests. So this show goes live on Mondays at 11 a.m. Mountain Standard Time and Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. And of course, I have incredible guests every single week, specifically for Mondays, those to be able to share their stories, their resources, what they have to be able to help you along your journey. And really, the whole point of Monday is bringing resources and information to you as far or centered around mental health and suicide awareness or prevention, and lots of other topics too. And then Wednesdays are really that place for us to showcase our warriors, those who have a story to share about whatever experience they have gone through. And that gives you two times that you can watch this show. So make sure that you're following along. And without further ado, I am going to bring up my guest for today, Marcella. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Sorry, I was just closing a few things on my phone because I noticed a little freeze. I'm like, no.
Oh, yeah, no worries. Well, thank you so much for joining, and we'll just kick it off. Please tell
Yes.
the audience a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm just really happy to be here, Kelly. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Marcella, and I am a psychologist. I specialize with eating disorders and body image issues and dieting. I've also had my own lived experience with anorexia in my teens and early 20s. And I lastly, yes, I'm in the office working with folks, but I'm also an advocate and an activist in terms of addressing like how eating disorders are viewed in our society, the way diet culture just intervenes and intercepts recovery, and all the kind of myths and thoughts we have around weight, around health, around what eating disorders are. I think there's a lot of stereotypes going around, so I also do work to really debunk all those myths and also just promote a lot of other activists in this field. My website is filled with lots of great, amazing folks and organizations that are doing great work, and so I just keep adding to that list. So, yeah, that's a little bit about who I am.
Awesome. Well, I am very excited for the conversation today because it hits home really close to home for my family. We had a family member who experienced an eating disorder, and I know this is a challenge, especially, I mean, I think across the age range, but I have heard more about youth and having eating disorders and with social media and all of those aspects.
Mhm.
So I'm really excited to have this conversation just more in depth. Like you said, what what is an eating disorder? What does that look like? Like what are those things that we think it is, but maybe it's different. So I'm curious, kind of, I guess the first question that is popping into my head when you say eating disorder, like what does that mean?
That's a great question, and I'm thinking. So I look at it as a spectrum, in that there is dieting, kind of this focus on must eat well, to some really dangerous medical behaviors that involve various and I don't really like to like list out all the behaviors, but just various behaviors that involve a lack of an intake of food, a manipulation with food, a ways to rid the food, and so there is a spectrum of behaviors where I feel an eating disorder comes in, or what is it? Because folks sometimes jokingly share like I have an eating disorder, and I get it, when folks share that, and then at the same time, like, well, I wish we wouldn't joke around that because it's not something to joke around. I mean, would you say, "Well, I sometimes kinda poke myself, because I'm feeling suicidal. So that's kinda funny, isn't it?" I'm like, "No, it's not funny." And for folks who have an eating disorder, um, there's a lot of pain there and a lot of suffering and a lot of shame. And when I work with folks with eating disorders, I think like many mental health struggles, illnesses, conditions, they're telling me that, like, my eating disorder serves a function in my life, and I have dealt with or dealing with a lot of pain, a lot of trauma that I can't deal with, so my eating disorder helps me manage, it helps me cope, it helps me avoid, it helps me make sense of something in my life that I can't seem to make sense of. It helps me feel like I have some agency in my life in ways that I don't have agency. Um, where I think we start to blend, or where the spectrum is that I think all kinds of manipulation with food is problematic.
Mm,
I think all the ways that we tell ourselves this is good food, this is bad food, this is healthy, this is not healthy, I shouldn't eat this, I should eat this. I think that's all problematic and concerning, actually. I mean, we live in a diet culture that just feeds us, pun intended, with that. Um, and I don't think we realize how damaging that is. When I speak with folks who don't have eating disorders, they do talk about like, but I have this relationship with food that I don't like, or yeah, I'm pretty hyper vigilant about what I am eating because I'm concerned about what's it going to do to my body. And folks do share sometimes like I'm concerned about my health, but there's a difference between, well, I'm concerned about what's it gonna do to my body versus I'm concerned if I'm gonna gain weight.
mm,
Like, there is, like, when folks share, like, let's say you have an allergy, like, I can't eat eggs because it's going to do X to me, then folks kind of share like, yeah, that's what I do. I am concerned and I don't eat eggs. And then you see like that's it. And I have friends who have allergies and like, yeah, that's it. I don't eat it. And now I move on. But folks that kind of share like, I don't want to eat this because I'm concerned about my health because I don't want to gain weight. I notice there's a lingering with that. And I'm like, no, it seems like this conversation is not over, and that lingering and in your head is just kind of there chatting constant, that nonstop. So that's where I feel like, well, actually it is problematic even if you don't have an eating disorder. Where I feel like you start to have an eating disorder is when I have to is when I I check for various behaviors, and these are starting to be very medically concerning. All restricting is medically concerning. Restricting when folks are saying like they have lowered energy, concerning. When folks start engaging in compensatory behaviors, concerning, because you are depriving your body. And in time, your body responds to a lack of nutrients, a lack of adequate food. Your body also starts to respond to that ongoing stress. So around food, and so that starts to that those start to be medical red flags. I ask folks too, like, how much is this relationship that you have with food taking over your life? And when it seems like it's really starting to take over and that it's very all consuming, a lot of decisions are made around it, then I'm like, okay, now we're getting into a place where this does feel, or this is really disordered eating. When folks share that they have unaddressed pain in their life, they have unaddressed trauma, depression, anxiety, that's when we also start that's when I'm also seeing just concerns around eating disorder behaviors. And there are other aspects too, that I want to talk about. But in a nutshell, I will say, like, when it starts to get medically concerning, when you're engaging in behaviors pretty regularly, when it interferes with your life, and when you're using it to kind of check out, avoid, numb, and there might be a reason for that. I'm not saying like don't do that, but I'm saying like then we are saying like, okay, there is an eating disorder here that needs to be addressed.
So there's a lot, and I love that you kind of did some clarification in there too, and thinking about I mean, an eating disorder can look very different for everyone, right? We
Right.
experience things differently, but also it's anything that might be affecting your life and not necessarily, like you were saying. I mean, I have allergies, so I know the things that I can and I can't eat.
Right.
I do sometimes say I'm on a seafood diet. I see food and I eat it. That's like the joke that I say. But that's not always true. I think somebody along the way told me that joke, and I thought it was silly. And so I absorbed it. But I know, like you just said, is that it's not funny to joke around if you do have an eating disorder or don't have an eating disorder, because you never know what somebody is going through or what they're experiencing, and excuse me, and how that could be really triggering to somebody. So I think it's important that you mention that. And also, there's different layers. There's a spectrum that really you have to look at what is really truly happening,
Mhm.
and is it affecting their life in a negative way, or what I mean, it could be what they may look at it is like in a positive light. They may think that what they're doing is they are having good eating habits, and it may seem to be better than what they may have experienced before. However, it could still be part of an eating disorder, which is really
Mhm.
interesting. So there's a couple things that popped up into my head. I would love for you, if you're open to sharing your story a little bit around anorexia.
Sure. Um, I be I began to diet, wasn't content with my body around age 15. That's when behavior started coming in. By the time I was 17, I had full blown anorexia. I would say though, like my story had similarities of what you might read as a stereotypical story with anorexia in terms of some perfectionism aspects, dieting gone wrong, so to speak. Um, but yet there were also like other story aspects that you often don't see in mainstream stories about folks who have eating disorders. My mother immigrated here from Peru, and my father is first generation Italian. And there was a lot of emphasis. I mean, these are two cultures that celebrate food, and food is a wonderful thing. So there was a lot of emphasis for me on you're going to eat all this food, you're going to enjoy this food. Doing so would be so disrespectful. And yet, at the same time, both my parents, and particularly my mom, took on what we call like an anti-fat lens, which means that she was, really concerned about me gaining weight, and not because she was being vain or cruel, but she saw this as a way of, you can't gain weight and be not just successful, but be included in our society. And for her, coming here as an immigrant, learning English, being a brown person dealing with racism, for her, that was protection for me. And so she took on an anti fat lens to assimilate into this culture, to the Western United States culture. She took that on to protect me, what she thought was protective. And in a way, she is right, of that. There are more opportunities afforded to me as a thin person. And she was concerned about the intersection with my race. So she legitimately had concerns. What she and others didn't realize is like the impact of taking that on and what it did for me, and that I couldn't make sense of what she was telling me, because it was like, you're going to eat all this food and yet you're gaining weight, and I'm really concerned about you gaining weight. I was 14, 15. I mean, how do I make sense of such a conflicted message to me? So I made sense. The only way I knew how was like, well, first I was very angry with that message, but I was also very confused. So my solution was like, well, then I'll just not eat. And that's where anorexia kind of came as this perfect storm to come in and just deal with all of that. And it was just like, there's so much that let me just kind of withdraw and literally shrink. And so that was just how my eating disorder developed, and that's how I held on and maintained it. And I didn't know how to make sense of it. I didn't know, like, how do I explain this story that feels so conflictual and I don't understand it myself as a teenager. And it wasn't until I read Becky Thompson's A Hunger So Wide and So Deep of women of color and queer women with eating disorders that I was reading these stories about women of color and them talking about the same exact conflicting messages that they received from their parents. And it was just like, oh my God. Like, how I was 24. I was like, it was the first time that I saw a story that resonated with me, that like I felt completely understood reading this absolute testimonial with this person. I have no idea who this person was, and yet reading a story that I felt like that I was my own in many ways. And it was very validating. I very much understood, but it was also like, I remember also feeling all the feelings that came up. Like, it was like this final, like this dam burst of like, okay, I finally get to have all the feelings because I'm finally seeing a story that made sense for me. So that helped me in my recovery, and it did more than help me. I mean, it just completely validated what I was experienced, that I didn't feel like some either not some anomaly, but just also like feeling like on some level like I'm just some kind of idiot for having this story, or that makes no sense. Like, what is going on here? But and finally did. And so that, yeah, that helped me in my recovery. I will also say, because I held that story, and then it gave me the motivation. I was also afforded a lot of privilege of who I was. I mean, I was believed that I had an eating disorder because I was very emaciated. And so no one said, no one questioned that. I was at a university where there were eating disorder services, so I was able to access those services. I had the time and the financial means to pursue therapy and treatment. So I also wanted to say that, because of my privilege, I was able to recover. I was able to access treatment. I was able. People did believe me that I had an eating disorder. So there were many factors in place.
Wow. Well, thank you. I mean, for sharing your story first and foremost, and just stopping eating. I mean, that obviously is not a good thing to have happen, but
Yeah.
having that culture in play, and having like what our parents say being kind of a factor of, well, I don't know if this is like good or bad, but I'm just going to stop eating. And
Mhm.
that is not helpful. But I am glad, like you said, is that you had the means and the support to be able to go get help. And not everybody has that, but it is available, which I think is really awesome. And I would love to, we're going to do a short, quick commercial, but I would love to dive into that a little bit more after this commercial of what is out there for those that may be experiencing a mental health challenge. So we will be right back. And like that, we are back.
We're back.
Yes. If you just started joining us or tuning in, we are talking today about eating disorders and all things as related. And my special guest, Marcella, had just shared her experience and what she went through with anorexia and just stopping eating. So I would love to, as I kind of mentioned before we went to that break, is diving into what options are available. But before we do that, well, no, let's go there first. And then another thing popped into my head. So if if you are a person who has the means to be able to go into, say, a full treatment center or get the help that you need, there's definitely resources there. But there's
Right.
also those that maybe don't have access to those. And I'd love to hear a little bit of both. Where can people access these resources that you know of?
Right. Well, if you have health insurance, you can work with your health insurance to get you into a some kind of treatment program. And there are treatment programs um, available. I'm speaking like just in the United States, and so there are various treatment centers available. Because of the pandemic, there are more online options available than we've ever had before. So that is a possibility for folks who have insurance. They have the means. They're able to work with their insurance or hospital. And sometimes you can just like call up at a treatment center. Like you could literally do an internet search, and there are various forms of residential intensive outpatient programs that a representative will work with you. So there's those that can access. If, let's say, you're not ready to make that step, and or you don't have insurance, if you go to my website, in the resource pages, there are various support groups that you can access. Maybe it's just like, I just need to talk with someone, or I need to talk with folks who actually get it. And so there are, on my website, there is ANAD, the Anorexia Association Disorder. They have various community groups. There is Liberating Jasper, also various community groups. There is Sage and Spoon, that have various groups for folks of color to join that group. There is Fed Up Collective, and these are community groups for queer and trans and not and non-binary folks. So there are some community groups that you can join. There's also you can it's not on my website, but you can look up, Eating Disorders Anonymous, and they have a lot of groups actually, and many of them are online. And that folks there can encourage you, can support you, to to further access means and ways for eating disorder recovery and or treatment.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, eating disorders were, I guess, not something that I hyper focused on prior to one of my family members experiencing an eating disorder. And I didn't realize how many resources there are out there, but also, I mean, I guess I knew in a way because being in the mental health space, and we also do a film festival every year with my nonprofit, which last year we got a couple films that were eating disorder based. We
Oh,
ended up
wow.
Yeah, we ended up showcasing one of them, and I think that was really eye opening for me, but also I through somehow a gymnastics school found me, and they had brought me in to talk with their gymnasts and the parents specifically about eating disorders and identity type um, challenges that they were having with their gymnasts, because
Mhm.
it's it's a thing. And I don't know, so one of the questions that popped into my head: eating disorders, are they generally a learned behavior like in youth?
Mm, that's a great question. I would say what I'm seeing more is that in youth, folks are sharing that they are learning eating disorder behaviors from each other. They are sharing that they're able to access various internet sources, whether they're websites or or online groups or chats, with all the various means from Instagram to TikTok, that folks there these are folks at a place where they are living a life with their reading disorder, and they are sharing how they maintain it, what are kind of tricks of the trade to have one. And so folks do I've worked with some teens who have shared like, yeah, I do sometimes access those. So that kind of those type of how to's are available. Teens, youth access them, right? They can access them and access them with a degree of sophistication. So I will say many times, yes, they're able to learn those behaviors. Other times, then this is where like diet culture can start to step in, or because folks also have shared like they have people in their lives that engage in dieting behaviors, engage in their own relationship with food. And so youth have shared like, I have seen people in my life, from my parents to older siblings, to other folks who have talked about their relationship with food, who are engaging. I see the way they are dieting in front of me. I see the way that they're eating various foods and not eating various foods.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, it sounds like, at least to me, it is this relationship with food and understanding where we're coming from individually and looking at it more in that aspect. Is it something that I'm trying to control because of maybe something in my past that has me in this, I guess I would say, negative type coping mechanism in a way? Or is it that I really truly believe that me eating this way is fueling my body effectively, and I choose to eat certain things based off of how my body is being fueled? Because I have heard multiple times that food is really energy for our body.
Mhm.
And we have to be able to utilize it effectively for our brain and for everything to function properly. And if we're eating all the crap that, we have nowadays, your body won't be at peak performance. But like you were talking about, where's that line? Where's that line that it now goes more into an eating disorder versus just fueling our bodies? So that is interesting.
Yes. Like on one end, that's a very individual question, and I will ask folks like only you can answer that question. And then there are just other like behavioral aspects or noticing interactions. Like if you are avoiding food situations, avoiding social time with folks because of the food and or needing to exercise, you might want to take a look at that. Um, there I also feel like we can't talk about eating disorders if we're not also going to talk about food justice as well. In terms of access to foods, I mean, we label processed sugary foods as bad for you, and we really have this negative connotation with those foods. And I'm not sharing with folks like, yeah, you need to eat those foods all the time because that's what we're doing, but yet pointing out that one, when we start to label foods, it can turn into this like binary good foods, bad foods. And two, we also have to look at well, of course we want access to all kinds of foods, and of course we want access to nourishing foods, and we live in food deserts as well. And particularly with this pandemic, like I have never seen food be really inaccessible. Like I've never seen produce the prices that they are now. And because my partner and I have financial means, I mean, she and I we're like, well, we buy the foods that we want to, but like we walk away like, wow, I've never had a grocery bill that big before. So it is yeah, also important to think about that. What are we doing to make food accessible for folks? Eh, um, because like more than ever, like accessing produce is really hard. So there's there's all of that. And then asking folks like, look, when it comes to food and your choices, yeah, we want to be very curious about food and take in food that feels really nourishing to us, that gives us energy, that feels good and also tastes good. And also like our body changes and adjusts, and perhaps there are some foods that our body just doesn't really tolerate. And and yet, at the end of the day, with someone saying, look, you know the difference between food liberation and food deprivation. And if you're sharing with me, like, I don't eat gluten because I feel so much better, great. If that's working for you. But if you're just like, I don't eat gluten because it's bad, but I'm just going to say that I eat good, that I feel better, like, that deprivation piece is only going to catch up with you, because our bodies do not understand deprivation from the amount of food that we need for to fuel ourselves, and also we need food that we enjoy. Like food pleasure, it's not just a kind of a trying to find the words. It's uh,
Like a
I'm a little
luxury.
Yeah, like a luxury or something frivolous. Or we do need food pleasure. We do need to enjoy our food. Sometimes we're not able to, or many times we may not be able to because of our lives and our financial means. But having food that we are enjoying is important.
Yeah, that's a good, I mean, I love that you also said that too, is that um where my brain was like, oh, so many good points that you made. Um in a way, like my brain is like, well, this is what I've heard in the past and this is what I'm understanding, and that like you said, is it's important to recognize that we don't have to label food bad or label food good for us. It's really what we enjoy individually. And that by putting these labels on different types of food, we're actually um, contributing to the issue
Mm,
and what is going on in, I think, in society in America with social media, like you were saying. I mean, they can access how to's, which is pretty frustrating. Especially, I kind of look at it as, I mean, like suicide awareness is what I talk about all the time, and they
mhm,
have, or Google has gotten really good at eliminating any of those how to's on the internet. And now they more showcase the crisis centers, or do you
mm,
need help? This is where you get help, right? Why aren't we doing that with all the other things in society, right? Like, how can we play a role with searches and content and providing good information versus the negative or harmful information, and looking at it from mental health and eating disorders and all the other things that are coming up. That was just really interesting to me when you were talking about that too, is
mhm,
the how to's and how do we change that dynamic and the verbiage around all of these things too.
mm, mhm.
But
Uh, wow. Are you asking me that?
well, I don't know. Yeah, sure. I'm like, I don't know how we do, but maybe do you have any thoughts around that?
I mean, I first of all, Kelly, I think the work you're doing and try to like destigmatize, debunk, de-shame mental health, and is so critical and so important. Also, I think many times when we like the compassion I think we have for mental health are folks who are in really extreme states. Like we have compassion for folks with eating disorders who are in an extreme anorexia. Like we have compassion for folks with like severe depressions, severe psychosis and all. But yet I also feel like the compassion we have also feels a little bit like removed, like, oh, I just feel so bad for these folks, but like they're so different from me. And I think what we're trying to do, which I think is a big ask for us as a society, is saying folks with mental illnesses are not any different from you, and we are all vulnerable folks, and it can happen to us. So also to say like life does happen to us, and so we can we can kind of lose ourselves um, um, with with any like mental health illness, and so I think just trying to change how we feel about it. The other piece is that we are all like products or beings in our society where we're walking around with our vulnerabilities, we're walking around with our pain, and we're walking around with our interactions. And so also taking a look at the role we play in in keeping mental health kind of like I'll say like alive and well, from how from the judgments we have, from our stereotypes, our levels of comfort and discomfort, and so it it is a call to us of saying like, well, how much are we willing to embrace this? How much are we willing to say, I'm vulnerable too? It can happen to me. And this is a challenge and a tricky one, but how much are we also willing to say, like, I have to take a look at ways I have my biases and way I am contributing to a harmful society that has a lot of really negative messages around mental health. And and that's okay. We all do it. And so also not to like double shame us or being like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing it. It's like, yeah, it's okay. We do it. We say harmful things. We do. How can we not? We live in a society that just like we've been influenced by it. And so it is up to us to think about like, wow, I have to take a look at that bias, or I have to take a look at my word choices, or I have to think of how I interact with people in my lives around mental health and all aspects. So and ways that I am insensitive, and ways that I don't get it. And so um, so that I those are big questions, and asking folks to step up perhaps in a way that they've never done before. But I will say, like, but they're very achievable, and you might hopefully, but no, I'm going to say pretty confidently, yes, you would see like how liberating it is not to have to carry that around, and how connecting it can be, and perhaps and I would say, like, also with some degree of confidence that, like, I think it would really improve our recovery rates if we really began to normalize and embrace and really step in as a collective to really help folks, all of us, not just help folks, but to help all of us with our mental health struggles.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, the compassion and looking at how we can help individually as and then as a collective across the board, and what words are we using, what content are we putting out there, what um how are we showing up to the world, and how can we change that narrative.
Mhm.
um I am curious, so if you are a parent, or if you are a family member, whomever it might be, your close friend, what is something that we can watch out for? Because, like you just said, is that we always look for those extremes. We're looking
Right.
for whether they are super, super skinny or really, really big, whatever, or maybe they're going to the bathroom consistently, something's happening. But how can we look for the smaller things as a person, as a human,
Mhm.
to be able to identify and help somebody that may be experiencing an eating disorder?
Right. Um, yeah, I mean, we have our stereotypical aspects, like, are they going to the bathroom after every meal, like right away? Are they, is, and, um, and for us to be mindful of not so much, someone's weight or what's in front of us, but have there been shifts in someone's body, and checking in. um Also, I think, another thing to note more is if how someone is presenting to you. I mean, it could be an eating disorder, it could be um other self-harm, or other other mental health struggles. If there's a just more and more degree of isolation, a withdrawal, what feels like a lack of presence, because I think those are things to kind of attune to, with a friend and a loved one, sooner rather than later. 'Cause yeah, as we talked about, like, we all know, or like the food behaviors that we might see from I mean, just all the things from going to the bathroom, being very hypervigilant about the food that is being served, a body that has changed in weight. So those are Um, and noticing for ourselves, like, am I taking these behaviors seriously or not, depending on someone's weight. I hear folks share, like, well, this person has a really big body, so I'm not really worried about the restriction. I'm like, I'm worried about the restriction. I don't care what their body is, or feeling like, well, they couldn't possibly have an eating disorder because they're really big, and it's like, no, they could, or they're probably binging. I'm like, you, those are just stereotypical responses. I work with a lot of folks who are in larger bodies who are doing a lot of restriction, and it's not a good thing. So it's noticing, like, first our own biases and our own reactions, but and noticing ways, like, folks can feel like they are there's shifts in how they are around you. It feels like a lack of connection, more isolation, more with withdrawal, and I'd like to think, like, we would want to check in with someone.
Yeah, definitely. So, um, watching out, I know like throughout today, you also talked about how are they talking about food and what are those. I one thing that you said is somebody with an allergy, you're like, I can't eat bananas. I know that. I stay away from them. And we're done with the conversation. Somebody who maybe is not like that messaging, it feels like there's more behind it, what they're trying to say. And then you just mentioned also the typical things that we can look for, maybe going to the bathroom after eating or being more restrictive around what they are eating. And I think it's just paying attention to those small things that are changing. Just because they're small, have a small body or a large body, doesn't mean that they're necessarily experiencing an eating disorder, but it could be. And so, how do we start
Mhm.
noticing even just the small changes? And that's what I heard the most from you. And I think that's just amazing way to look at it too. And then also recognizing within ourselves what are the labels that we're putting on food, like the good and the bad labels,
Mhm.
and how can we be more, I want to say inclusive. It's kind of, I mean, inclusive of food, right? How can we be
Right.
more inclusive of food and not label it like we label everything else? So,
Mhm.
but I think this is an amazing conversation and one that really needs to be shared because for whatever reason, eating disorders are one of the mental health challenges that I don't think are talked about enough.
Right.
And so we absolutely, the more and more conversations that we can have, and I know that I've had several friends that have had eating disorders in the past, and they said that they're in recovery. They're in recovery for life because it
Mm.
doesn't just go away. It is something that you have to be mindful of, like you were saying. And it can be a challenge that comes up at any point in time, but hopefully you have access or resources to be able to get into treatments like you were talking about. And if you don't, there are other options out there. So, which brings me to how can people find you if they want to work with you?
You can go to my website. Thank you, right there. And I do a lot of trainings for folks for various clinics, various hospital settings, schools, university programs, and this is something I really I love doing, because it stimulates a lot of really great conversations, and so I often walk away from those trainings, like, many times I'm challenged myself, and I think it's just it's just so many steps in terms of trying to, just raise the energy or raise the vibration of, like, how are we holding food and bodies in our society, and really stepping away from, like, well, there are eating disorder specialists and they're way over here, but that's not me. And I'm like, you will encounter eating disorders in your work and in your life. So it is not it's way out there. And so it's also raising the conversations more and more. And folks also share their own personal experiences as well. So those are so that is the best way to get a hold of me is through my website.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Again, one more time down here. That is her website if you want to reach out to Marcella and have more conversations with her. But I appreciate you coming on today and
Thank
being my
you.
guest and just having this open conversation about eating disorders and something we need to talk more about. So, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, y'all. Oh my gosh, that was another amazing episode of Make Mental Health Matter. On Mondays, I talk to guests who are either professionals in the mental health space, advocates, or those that live with or experience a mental health challenge. And if you've watched any of the episodes in the past, because I've been doing this since 2021, you will notice that most people that get into what they do is centered around their own experience or their own story. It's something that they lived with and something that they were able to move through with the help of whether it is going into treatment or getting I don't know, like with help. But ultimately going through it, not just shoving it down or pretending like it's not happening. And that's what I love about being able to bring on guests that can give you information, resources, have these open conversations that we don't necessarily always have in society. But why not? Let's have the conversation. Start noticing. You just use your noticing skills to even look for those really small things. And if you want to learn more about Marcella and what she does, please go to her website and check that out. Also, join us back here this Wednesday at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time for another episode. And it is the theme of Warrior Wednesdays. I'm pretty sure I have a guest this Wednesday. I don't know. I'll have to go check. But either way, join us Wednesday. If you can't make it, join us back next Monday at 11 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. And make sure you follow, make sure you subscribe, whatever it is, add us to your favorite list so that you don't miss another episode. And feel free to share this information with anybody that you feel like it might be helpful in their life, because you never know who might identify with and really need to have that extra support. So we'll see y'all. Bye.